Here is something really important. I'm going to be sharing what happened that grabbed everyone's attention, and the CEO of the IRS, Frank, came out publicly and confirmed that 94% of Americans are expected to see a boost involving hundreds and billions of dollars. And that's not my wording, that's his wording. And that's exactly what I'm going to be sharing with you in this video. Because when someone at that level says that much money is coming to that many people, we got to slow down, we got to listen carefully, and we need to separate the facts from the fiction. So let me go ahead and set the stage with this. All right. So Frank made these comments and it was televised in an interview. And what's really interesting is this isn't the first time we've heard this. You've probably heard similar remarks recently in the headlines, in the news. There was an announcement made by the Treasury Secretary Scott, who mentioned something about this. The White House economic advisors mentioned this. Even the president himself mentioned this. And they're all pretty much saying the same thing in different ways. And essentially what they're saying is that a lot of money is coming to a lot of people, but the way this is being explained is getting pretty confusing for a lot of people, especially for people who benefit from Social Security. So in the interview, Frank, who's the CEO of the IRS, says that three big things are going to be happening. 94% of middle-class Americans are getting a boost. Also, refunds are going to be the biggest they've ever been in U.S. history, and Social Security recipients could see a $6,000 benefit. So now let's talk a little bit more about that third one, and that's where a lot of alarms start going off when it comes to the subject, because that statement by itself is not necessarily the full story. So if you receive Social Security, I don't want you necessarily getting your hopes up for something that's going to be described incorrectly. So before we go further, let's talk a little bit more about Frank and what his role is as the acting head of the Internal Revenue Service. So that's going to be important to be able to understand this. He's also serving in a leadership role tied to Social Security Administration. So that's why there's all this confusion. And yes, you heard that right. We've never really had like a CEO style figure at the IRS like this before. So when he speaks publicly, the markets listen, tax professionals listen, and everyday Americans should listen and take what he has to say seriously. Because by not listening doesn't mean that you are going to make this thing go away, right? You want to make sure that you're taking an understanding of what's actually going on. So let me be really clear on this. When they say hundreds of billions of dollars, the biggest refund ever, money coming to Americans, they're talking about tax refunds. All right, and specifically the refunds that are going to be driven by that large reconciliation tax bill that was passed over the summer. Many people refer to it as OBB, One Beautiful Bill, and that was signed in July 4th of 2025. And the president even said some households could see 11,000 to 20,000 more when everything's accounted for. So that's not going to be a check in the mail. That's not a stimulus. It's just basic tax math. So how much could you expect, and how much are we really talking about as it relates to this? All right. So here's what officials are floating out right now. They're saying that about 150 to 200 billion in refunds are going to come up in the next cycle, and the average refund could be over $4,000 plus. And it's going to be mostly concentrated among low and middle income earners. Now, is that possible? Yes. Especially with the withholding changes, there's credits that have been expanded and they've been added to the tax bill. There's deductions that have been increased. But this is still just refund money, meaning that it's just money coming back to you. So now let's talk a little bit more about this $2,000 stimulus check that a lot of people are talking about, this dividend, and there's a lot of confusion about that, right? So here's the elephant in the room. The $2,000 dividend, the $2,000 stimulus, whatever you want to name it, whatever you've probably heard it called, the real issue with that is that officials keep saying that it is separate from refunds. So back in November, Scott said something very different. He suggested that this $2,000 could show up in through the tax system. And that's important to understand, because here's what you want to be prepared for. If Congress can't get the $2,000 passed on its own, then they may say later, well, you guys already got it. You already got this money, and point to a larger refund. And I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I'm saying that it's possible to happen. So you shouldn't be shocked if it does happen. So let's fix the $6,000 Social Security claim, right? This is probably the most important part of this video. So when Frank of the IRS said Social Security recipients can see up to a $6,000 benefit, I know it sounds amazing, but it is a little bit misleading, all right? So here's the truth. It's not a $6,000 check. It's not a benefit increase. It's not an extra $6,000 Social Security money. It's actually just a tax deduction. And there's a big difference with that. So what exactly is this $6,000 about? All right. So the $6,000, here's how this thing really works. Okay. So it's a $6,000 federal tax deduction, and it applies to people who are 65 and older. And you must be 65 for at least one day in 2025 to be able to benefit from this. And there's also going to be income limits. So depending on how much money that you're going to make, it's going to impact how much you're able to get. So to be able to get this full $6,000 deduction, you have to make under $75,000 in the current year. And it actually phases out between $75,000 to $175,000. For married couples, that's going to be a $12,000 total. And if they fall under 150, and that's going to phase out to 250,000. So deduction reduces taxable income. It does not put $6,000 in your pocket. Depending on your tax bracket, it might actually just save you maybe $600, $900, maybe $1,200, but that's pretty much it. And why is this distinction so important? So when officials use phrases like a $6,000 benefits, big money for Social Security recipients, people hear that and they automatically assume, okay, I'm going to get a check. I'm going to get it cash. I'm going to get this big economic boost. But that's not really what this is, right? So I don't want you or anyone to be planning their finances around money that doesn't necessarily exist, and that is not necessarily going to be a dollar for dollar money coming into your pocket. So here is the key takeaway that I want you to understand as it relates to all the things I just shared here. So based on the information that we have so far, refunds are likely to be larger this year. Yes, a lot of money is going to be flowing through the system. Yes, low and middle income Americans will probably benefit the most if this refund situation is actually true and it's actually going to play out. But just understand this: refunds are not necessarily stimulus checks. Deductions are not necessarily automatic money in a check. And you want to be careful and be really have a deeper understanding as to the headlines that you're reading. All right. So I'm going to be breaking more of this down for you. That's what I'm looking to do. If you or someone that you know can benefit from this, make sure you go ahead and share this. If you're looking to be able to maximize how much money you save in taxes, or maximize how much money you get as far as a tax refund, go ahead and write refund in the comments, and I will go ahead and send you a link to be able to get on a call with myself and my team. But make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any updates. Drop your questions in the comments below. I thank you for being here. I truly appreciate you. Have a happy holiday, and I look forward to seeing you very, very soon in the next video. Take care. Bye.